I'm George with the Petaluma Church of Christ, and I'm glad that you've joined us again for this study. And what I want to talk about is a group of people that we're introduced to in the New Testament. And that group of people that we find in the New Testament are lepers. They're people that are suffering from the disease of leprosy. And they're different from other groups that we see in the New Testament, in the gospel. They're different from the group of sinners that Jesus is working with, and people are pointing out, like, he hangs out with sinners. Sinners are, of course, those people were known in society of doing bad stuff and well, sinning. And the lepers were simply seen as people that were unclean, not because of what they did, not because of their sin, but because of who they were. And as people, they were just seen just as bad. So there was really no difference between being a sinner or being unclean. Now, one of the terrible things about leprosy is the impact that would have on people socially. What you might not know back during the time of that the New Testament covers, the Gospels cover, those people that were lepers were required to shout unclean when they would come into in contact with others. They would have to shout that they were unclean. So and people would in a crowd would avoid them, right? They didn't want to be touched by a leopard. They didn't want to catch leprosy. I almost think of today with coronavirus, especially when the pandemic started, how paranoid people were being to be around others. It's like, don't get too close to me, right? I don't want to catch COVID. And could you imagine if you had COVID and we were allowed to walk around and stuff, and every time you'd go in and have to say, I have COVID, and just how people would react to that, right? They would run away. They wouldn't get close to you. They would go because they wouldn't want to get COVID. So I think we can kind of understand some of the social impact that this would have on people that can never get close to someone. People that would always feel less human because of the condition that they have. And there's a story in the Gospels when Jesus crossed paths with a leper. And the leper notices Jesus, and even though the leper knew it was against the rules, the leper approaches Jesus. He approaches him. And Jesus has the ability to heal his leprosy, which he does, but would he want to do the unthinkable, right? He could just say, you're healed, right? But what Jesus does, rather than just saying you're healed or your faith has made you well, he reaches out and he touches this man with leprosy, at the risk of catching the physical disease and also becoming unclean himself. But Jesus reaches out and he touches the leper. And in that moment, a man who hadn't been touched maybe in years, he hadn't been able to have close contact with other people, he's touched by the one who was able to heal him from the inside out. He's touched by Jesus. He actually has someone touch skin to skin with him. And it's been reported, and studies have shown that human beings need 8 to 10 touches each day to remain physically and emotionally healthy. Actually, they've done a lot of studies on babies and the need to be touched and to held and to talk to. We are created for that intimacy, to be touched, to be hugged, to be in proximity with others. I think this is one of the struggles that we've had through this last 2 years of our pandemic, and not for people being isolated from others, people being isolated from touch and being in association with other people. And so I think we can relate a bit to the plight of this man with leprosy, someone who hasn't been touched. When you think about it, when we touch, we really literally cross into someone else's space, right? We're right into their physical space. And the Bible, when speaking of really intimacy, like in marriage, right, it talks about the two becoming one, because they're both in a marriage. Husband and wife are within each other's personal space a lot. But on other levels, not just in the marriage level, we communicate by how we interact with one another. We show our love and affection by touch, handshake and hug and hand on the shoulder and a pat on the back. We do those things because we are worthy of love, and we show love to each other because we're made in the image of God. God is love, and He's made us in His image. And so being touched really matters. And think about this. How amazing would it be to be actually touched physically by Jesus, right? His hands reach out and to touch you. We don't have a lot of leopards in our culture walking around today, but there are many people who are still considered lepers in most churches, in most religious settings. The church doesn't go so far as to say that they shouldn't be there, but people aren't required to shout unclean when they walk through the doors, but we're careful not to get too close, to touch them, to associate with them, to love them well. And we can have, depending on our group, and this is something we need to be very aware of, that churches and church people can avoid or not be so welcoming to others, depending on maybe what their lifestyle is. If they've had an affair or a DUI or committed a crime of some sort, or struggling with drugs, or their teenage daughter got pregnant, planned or unplanned, and just like, okay, kind of we push these people away, even along maybe racial lines or other lifestyle choices, where it's like, okay, like we don't want to get close to these people. And churches can make it really clear that those people are not welcome within their community, within their assembly, within their ways. And so we really have to be careful. We really need to be observant of how we as Christians, as disciples of Jesus, how we draw lines in the sand that we don't allow people to get close to, especially within the church community. And it's not that you can't come, kind of this idea that we might project is we just really don't want you here. It's not that you're not invited, well, maybe you just don't really fit in, which I've been told at churches I've been like, well, you just really don't fit in because I just didn't maybe follow all the ways that culture was set up. And so they didn't really want me there. It's not that we don't love you like a Christian should. It's just that we don't approve of what you're doing, or we want you to know that we don't approve. I don't know. Maybe you've been in a church like this. Maybe you've been part of being a church like this and having some of these similar views. It's been said, if you're different in any way, the church is the last place you want to be by some. The church sees a unicorn and says, not good. And we have to think about that when it comes to, as disciples, people that are following Christ, who loved all and died for everyone because of his love. But what if the church does welcome and love unicorns? Those people that are really different, and bringing those people in, and even though all the hardships it might cause that core group, because those people are different. The church should be one that does do that, welcoming others in and having that sacrifice and loving those people, even though they're different. Now, I hope that my church, the one I'm representing, right, would be a church like that. That's my desire, right? And that's the desire of a church where we're trying to build and be a church that is welcoming to others. I really hope the worldwide church, the church universal, the church Catholic, right, would embrace that too. And just really how different the church would look and what the church would put on an emphasis of importance if we really did have the mind of Jesus. Um, Having churches that really do look like the people Jesus hung out with. The people who no one else wanted to touch with a 10-foot pole. Those are the people that Jesus got close to. When we look at the gospel, those are the people he invited in to tell them that God really did love them, and that God really did see them, and that God really does want to have a relationship with them, despite how religion has treated them, despite on how culture has treated them. There's a lot of unclean stuff in our lives, and it's just harder to see our own leprosy than it is to see the leprosy of others. And Jesus warned us of that when he spoke of, trying to get the speck out of your brother's eye, but not seeing the log that is in your own eye. We need to have some self-reflection and self-examination about who we are and what we're doing. So if you want to love people who are different from you, you have to get uncomfortable. You have to actually have conversations with people who you know think differently from you, who may live differently from you, who come from a different culture than you. You need to move from your space into someone else's space and meet others in their space, on their ground, and in their place of comfort, not our place of comfort. And so we can ask questions. We can ask them to share their story. We can listen. We can agree. We can even disagree. And I think that's something that's very lost in our culture right now, within our own country. This ability to think differently than others and still love and respect others. And so we really like to polarize and put people into boxes, or put people into categories, and put like, this is who they are and they're different from me, and we need to hate them. But when we start realizing conservatism polarizes progressives, and progressives polarize conservatives, and we can put all these other polar opposites in one another, that there's this polarization that's happening. If we are people that start loving people that are different like us, we're not going to label others. We're not going to demonize others. We're going to start seeing them who they really are, that they are two people made in the image of God. And we have to follow the second commandment that Jesus gave us when he said, when he was asked that question, what's the greatest commandment? He says, love your Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, right? And the second's like that, love your neighbor as yourself. And he gives us the story of the Good Samaritan, who's somebody who's the total opposite, someone who polarized the person needing to be helped from that culture. We need to do that too. It's impossible to love someone we've labeled, who we've demeaned, who we think is lesser than in some way. And what the powerful thing love does is love breaks rules. It breaks down those barriers, because love sets aside fear. Love reaches beyond those who are like us. And if we're going to be followers of Jesus, we have to be like Jesus and the leopard, right? We have to go and touch those, love those, seek out those that are either going to approach us or we approach them, that are different, that have been rejected, that are in one way or another unclean from us. Love reaches out to the person who is different. Thanks for sticking around with us in this video. If you like this video and want to see others like this, please like the video and subscribe to our channel so you know when the Petaluma Church of Christ is putting out content for you to follow, for you to be edified, for you to be encouraged, for you to be challenged in some ways as you either seek Jesus Christ or you're already a follower of Jesus Christ. If we can help you along your path in relationship with Jesus, please send us a note, write in a comment in our comment section. We'd love to respond to you and help you in those ways that we can. Until next time, God bless and we'll see you again.